What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actresses walks onto a talk show stage expecting a friendly chat, only to be blindsided by a host who seems determined to tear her down in front of millions? In just 34 seconds, a single comment from Graham Norton would ignite a confrontation so intense, so unprecedented, that it would end with Dame Judi Dench being escorted off the set, leaving audiences around the world absolutely stunned. The lights were bright in the studio that evening. The audience was buzzing with excitement. They had come to see one of the greatest actresses of all time. Dame Judi Dench, a woman who had graced screens for decades, who had played queens and spies, who had made people laugh and cry with equal measure. She walked onto the stage wearing an elegant dark suit, her signature short hair perfectly styled, waving graciously to the cheering crowd. This was supposed to be a celebration, a chance to talk about her incredible career, her latest projects, maybe share a few funny stories from the set. Just another night on The Graham Norton Show. But something was different tonight. Something was off. Graham Norton stood up from his iconic red chair to greet her. The cameras captured every moment as they shook hands. The audience applauded. Everything seemed normal. Judi settled into her seat, crossing her legs, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She smiled warmly at Graham, at the audience, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Graham started with the basics. "Dame Judi, wonderful to have you here. You look absolutely radiant as always." Judi nodded graciously. "Thank you, Graham. It's lovely to be here." "Now, you've been in this business for, what, about 100 years now?" Graham said with a laugh. The audience chuckled nervously. It was meant as a joke, but there was something about the delivery, something slightly cutting in his tone. Judi's smile tightened just a fraction, but she handled it with class. "Well, not quite 100, but it certainly feels like it sometimes," she replied, trying to keep things light. Graham leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "I mean, you must have worked with absolutely everyone at this point. Every actor, every director. Do you ever get tired of it? The same routine, the same questions, the same press tours?" Judi paused. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't think of it as routine, Graham. Every role is different. Every story matters. That's why I do what I do." Right, Graham said, waving his hand dismissively. "But come on, at your age, surely you must think about slowing down? Maybe letting some of the younger actresses have a chance?" The audience went quiet. You could hear the collective intake of breath. This was not the playful banter they were used to. This was something else entirely. Judi's posture stiffened. Her smile vanished. "I beg your pardon?" she said, her voice measured but cold. Graham seemed to realize he had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I'm just saying, there's a whole new generation of talent out there. Maybe it's time for the older generation to, step aside gracefully." Judi's eyes flashed. "Step aside? Graham, I've spent my entire life perfecting my craft. I've earned every role I've played. Age has nothing to do with my ability or my passion for acting." Of course, Graham said, his tone dripping with condescension. "But you have to admit, Hollywood, the film industry, it's a young person's game now. People want fresh faces, new energy, not the same old." He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like poison. The audience was stunned into silence. Cameras continued to roll, capturing every uncomfortable second. Judi sat forward in her chair, her voice shaking with controlled anger. "The same old what, Graham? Go on, finish your thought." Graham shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that he had pushed too far. "I didn't mean anything by it. I was just—" "You were just what?" Judi interrupted, her voice rising. "Just trying to insult me on national television? Just trying to diminish everything I've accomplished? I came here tonight to talk about my work, to connect with people who appreciate art and storytelling. I did not come here to be talked down to by someone who thinks age determines worth." The audience began to murmur. Some people started clapping in support of Judi. Graham's face flushed red. He clearly hadn't expected this level of pushback. "Dame Judi, I think you're overreacting," Graham said, trying to regain control of the situation. "It was just a bit of fun, just some light banter. You know how this show works." "Light banter?" Judi's voice was incredulous. "You just suggested that I should retire because I'm old? You implied that I'm no longer relevant. That's not banter, Graham. That's disrespect." Graham laughed nervously, looking to the audience for support, but they weren't laughing with him anymore. "Well, I mean, you are getting on a bit, aren't you? It's just facts." That was it. That was the moment everything exploded. Judi stood up from her chair, her entire body radiating fury. How dare you? How absolutely dare you? I have forgotten more about acting than you will ever know about hosting a talk show. I have won awards, I have moved audiences, I have given my life to this profession. And you sit there in your comfortable chair, making millions by asking celebrities silly questions? And you think you have the right to tell me when my time is up? The audience erupted. Some were cheering, some were gasping, some were standing up to see better. Graham looked like he had been slapped. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't mean, he stammered. You meant exactly what you said, Judi cut him off. And I will not sit here and be insulted. Not by you, not by anyone. Graham's face twisted into something ugly. The charming host persona dropped completely, revealing something much less pleasant underneath. Oh, come off it, Judi. You're being dramatic. This is exactly why nobody wants to work with divas anymore. You can't take a joke. You can't handle a little criticism. Criticism? Judi's voice was like ice. You call that criticism? That wasn't professional critique, Graham. That was personal attack disguised as humor. There's a difference, and you know it. Graham stood up now too, his face red with anger and embarrassment. You know what? Maybe I was right. Maybe you are past your prime. Because the Judi Dench I used to admire wouldn't throw a tantrum over a few harmless comments. The audience gasped again. This was unraveling in real time. Producers were likely panicking in the control room, but the cameras kept rolling. Judi's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Past my prime? I was nominated for an Oscar last year. What have you done lately besides insult your guests? I've done plenty, Graham shot back. I've built a career. I've made people laugh. I've created something special here, and I won't have some washed-up actress tell me how to do my job. Washed up? He actually said it. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Judi's face went pale, then flushed with rage. Get me off this stage, now! A producer rushed onto the set, trying to calm things down, trying to salvage what was left of the interview. But Judi was done. She turned to the audience, her voice steady despite her obvious anger. I apologize to all of you for this spectacle. You came here expecting entertainment, and instead you've witnessed something quite unpleasant. But I will not stand here and be disrespected. I have given too much, worked too hard, and earned too much respect to let anyone treat me this way. She turned back to Graham, her eyes blazing. You should be ashamed of yourself. You had the privilege of interviewing one of the greatest actresses of our generation, and you chose to use that opportunity to be cruel and petty. I hope it was worth it. Graham's face was purple now. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. You're making yourself look ridiculous. The only person who looks ridiculous here is you, Judi replied. A man so insecure in his own relevance that he has to tear down others to feel important. Another producer appeared, this one speaking urgently into Judi's ear. She nodded curtly. Yes, I'm leaving. I won't spend another second in this toxic environment. Graham threw his hands up. Fine, leave, walk out. Show everyone what a professional you really are. Judi turned to face him one last time. I've been a professional for over 50 years. I've worked through illness, through personal tragedy, through every challenge this industry could throw at me. And I've done it all with dignity and grace. Something you clearly know nothing about. She started walking off the stage. The audience was on their feet now, many of them applauding her. But Graham wasn't done. He couldn't let her have the last word. You know what, Judi? He called after her. Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, you'd still be getting good roles. Maybe the problem isn't your age. Maybe it's your attitude. Judi stopped dead in her tracks. She slowly turned around, and the look on her face could have frozen fire. She walked back towards Graham, and for a moment, it looked like she might actually do something physical, but she stopped just a few feet away from him. My attitude? Her voice was quiet but deadly. You want to talk about attitude? You invited me here under false pretenses. You smiled and shook my hand and then proceeded to attack me from the moment I sat down. You questioned my relevance, my talent, my right to continue working. You called me old, washed up, and sensitive. And now you're blaming me for my attitude? Graham crossed his arms defensively. I'm just saying, if you can't handle a little ribbing, maybe television isn't for you anymore. A little ribbing, Judi repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. Is that what you call it? Let me tell you something, Graham. I have been interviewed by the best in the business. I've sat across from journalists who ask tough questions, who challenge me, who push me to think deeper about my work. That's good television. That's good interviewing. What you did tonight wasn't any of that. It was just mean-spirited nonsense from a man who thinks being rude is the same as being interesting. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was no longer just a talk show gone wrong. This was a masterclass in standing up for yourself. Graham's voice took on a mocking tone. Well, thank you for the critique, Dame Judi. I'm sure your decades of experience sitting in chairs being interviewed makes you an expert on hosting. It makes me an expert on recognizing when someone is out of their depth, Judi fired back. You've spent so long surrounded by people who laugh at your jokes and applaud your every word that you've forgotten how to have a real conversation. You've mistaken cruelty for wit. I'm not cruel, Graham protested. I'm funny. People love this show because I say what everyone's thinking. No, Judi said firmly. You say what you're thinking and assume everyone agrees with you. There's a difference. What you're thinking tonight is ageist, disrespectful, and frankly beneath the standards of someone in your position. Graham's hands balled into fists at his sides. You can't speak to me like this. This is my show. Then perhaps you should act like it, Judi said. A good host makes their guests feel welcome, draws out interesting stories, creates an atmosphere of warmth and fun. You've done none of that tonight. Instead, you've created a hostile environment and then acted shocked when your guest refuses to tolerate it. A security guard appeared at the edge of the stage, clearly sent by the frantic producers. Judi saw him and nodded. Yes, I'm ready to go. But Graham wasn't finished. You know what your problem is, Judi? You take yourself too seriously. It's just a talk show. It's not Shakespeare. Judi's laugh was bitter. You're right, Graham. It's not Shakespeare. Shakespeare requires talent, nuance, and intelligence. This, she gestured around the stage, this is just sad. Graham's face contorted with rage. Get her out of here. Security, escort Dame Judi off my stage. She's clearly not capable of handling a simple interview. The security guard approached hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Judi held up a hand. That won't be necessary. I can walk myself out. Though I find it interesting, Graham, that you're having me removed when I'm the one who tried to leave peacefully multiple times. You're disrupting my show, Graham said. I'm disrupting your show? Judi's eyebrows shot up. You disrupted this interview the moment you decided to attack rather than engage. You turned what should have been a pleasant conversation into a battlefield, and now you're playing the victim. The security guard stood awkwardly between them, unsure what to do. The audience was still on their feet, many of them filming on their phones despite the no recording policy. This was history in the making, and everyone knew it. Judi took a deep breath, composing herself. When she spoke again, her voice was calm but filled with disappointment. You know, Graham, I've seen your show before. I've watched you interview people with charm and warmth. I know you're capable of better than this, which makes tonight even more baffling. You chose to be this person. You chose to belittle and demean. And for what? A few laughs? A viral moment? Ratings? Graham said nothing. His jaw clenched tight. I hope it was worth it, Judi continued, because you've shown everyone watching exactly who you are when the cameras are rolling. Not the fun-loving host, not the charming entertainer, but someone who uses their platform to punch down, to make others feel small so you can feel big. She turned to the audience one final time. Thank you all for your support tonight. I'm sorry you had to witness this, but sometimes standing up for yourself is more important than being polite. The audience erupted in applause. Many were cheering, some were crying, all were moved by what they had witnessed. Judi gave a small bow, her dignity intact despite everything. As she walked toward the exit, Graham called out one last time, "You'll never work with this network again." Judi stopped but didn't turn around. I've worked with every major network in the world, Graham. I think I'll survive without this one. And with that, she walked off the stage, her head held high, leaving Graham standing alone in front of a now hostile audience. The cameras captured it all. His face red, his hands shaking slightly, the realization dawning that he had made a terrible, career-altering mistake. The security guard awkwardly followed Judi off stage, though it was clear he was there more for show than anything else. In the wings, producers swarmed around her, apologizing profusely, begging her to reconsider, to come back, to give Graham another chance. But Judi was resolute. I came here in good faith, she told them quietly. I came here to promote my work and to have a pleasant conversation. What happened out there was unacceptable. I will not be returning to that stage tonight or any other night. Meanwhile, back on the stage, Graham tried to salvage the situation. He turned to the audience with a forced smile. Well, that was unexpected. Dame Judi certainly has a flair for the dramatic, doesn't she? But the audience wasn't having it. Someone in the back shouted, "You were out of line." Others nodded in agreement. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Graham was no longer the beloved host. He was the villain of the story. He tried to laugh it off. "Come on, everyone. It was just a bit of fun that got out of hand. You know how these things go." But nobody was laughing. The silence was deafening. In the corridor outside the studio, Judi was gathering her things from the dressing room. Her hands were steady now, the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of vindication. She had stood up for herself. She had refused to be diminished. And it felt right. An assistant knocked on the door. "Dame Judi, Graham's producers want to know if there's anything they can do to make this right." Judi looked up, her expression unreadable. "They can ensure this never happens to another guest. They can have a serious conversation with Graham about respect and professionalism. And they can issue a public apology, though I won't be holding my breath for that last one." The assistant nodded and scurried away. Judi looked at herself in the mirror one last time, smoothed down her jacket, and picked up her bag. As she walked out of the building, she passed by a monitor showing the live feed of the show. Graham was attempting to continue, trying to interview his next guest, but the atmosphere was completely wrong. The magic was gone. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. Judi's driver was waiting, having been alerted to the early departure. As she slid into the back seat, she felt exhausted but oddly at peace. "Rough night, ma'am?" the driver asked gently. "You could say that," Judi replied with a small smile. "But necessary." The car pulled away from the studio, leaving behind the chaos and the cameras and the man who had underestimated the strength of the woman he had tried to tear down. Back in the studio, the show limped to its conclusion. Graham went through the motions with his remaining guests, but everyone could feel it. The air was thick with tension and disapproval. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, when the audience filed out in uncomfortable silence, Graham sat alone in his red chair, the weight of what he had done settling on his shoulders. His producers approached cautiously. "We need to talk about what happened tonight." Graham waved them off. "It was just a misunderstanding. These things blow over." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. What had happened tonight wasn't going to blow over. It was going to define him. The phones in the control room were already ringing off the hook. Social media was exploding with clips and commentary. The narrative was writing itself, and Graham was firmly cast as the antagonist. In her car, Judi's phone began to buzz with messages of support from fellow actors, directors, friends, and fans who had already seen clips of the confrontation online. She read a few of them, grateful for the solidarity, but she didn't respond yet. She needed time to process everything that had happened. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "If you don't mind me saying, ma'am, you handled that beautifully, stood your ground without losing your composure." Judi met his eyes in the mirror and smiled. "Thank you. I've been in this business long enough to know my worth. Nobody gets to take that away from me. Not at this stage of my life, not ever." And that was the truth of it. Judi Dench had spent decades earning respect, building a legacy, creating art that moved people. One insecure talk show host with a bad attitude couldn't change that. What he could do, what he had done, was reveal his true character to the world. The car drove through the London streets, past theaters where Judi had performed, past landmarks that held memories of a lifetime in the arts. She had given so much to her craft, and she would continue to give, regardless of what Graham Norton or anyone else thought about her age or her relevance. Back at the studio, the cleanup crew was already at work. The audience had left. The lights were dimming. But the impact of what had happened would linger. Graham sat in his dressing room, staring at his reflection, perhaps for the first time really seeing himself as others now saw him. Not as the charming host, but as someone who had let power and platform go to his head. His phone rang. It was the head of the network. He knew before answering that this conversation would not be pleasant. He had created a situation that would require damage control, public statements, possibly even consequences for his behavior. All because he couldn't resist making a few cutting remarks, couldn't help but try to diminish someone extraordinary to make himself feel more important. As Judi's car pulled up to her home, she felt a sense of closure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations about what had happened. But tonight, she had done exactly what needed to be done. She had defended herself with grace and strength. She had shown that dignity doesn't mean accepting disrespect. She stepped out of the car, thanked her driver, and walked to her front door. Behind her, the city continued its endless rhythm, unaware that something significant had shifted. A line had been drawn, a statement had been made, and Dame Judi Dench had reminded everyone why she was, and always would be, a force to be reckoned with.